page 111 and talk about project teams. And you can see the first principle, recruit to purpose. What are you trying to pull off? Term friend of the court. Do any of you use that? The interpretation we would give it is somebody who can communicate with the queen or the king and isn't intimidated by position at all or anything like that. And friends of the court can go in and say, hey, if you do this, you're going to bury this project. And not everyone can talk to the queen or the king. They can handle things remarkably well by being straight in a way others won't. And I've seen them save many projects. Principle 2, you've all expressed it, diversity, ages, just different backgrounds, different experiences, different schools of thought. You can see down there where it has knowledge perspectives of experts, co-perts, and in-person. That's our language. Everybody knows what an expert is, a person with a body of knowledge and a code of ethics. And I'm talking a real expert, not a pseudo-expert, not somebody who thinks they are, but somebody who, through wisdom and seasoning and timing and having been there, you just know. A co-pert knows about the subject, but wouldn't be of an expert capacity. And an in-pert is a bright person who knows about this, who is really clueless. One of the beauties about this learning lab is we have co-perts, experts, and in-perts. I was asked one time to help in a church to get the people singing better, and I went through all of, this was not a Baptist church, it was a Catholic church, and I went through all of this stuff, get all of this diversity, get these different backgrounds, and get all this. I didn't pay attention to any of it. I showed up to do my little, my little session, and they had all female lead singers in the choir. They didn't have any men, first of all. They didn't have anybody who needed a six-pack of beer before they would sing. It was just the same old typical people, and guess what came out of it? Same old typical stuff. Reconstituted the group, put a whole other group together, and they put some non-singers in the group. Seriously, because if you can get the non-singers, they bring a perspective to the table. The ideas that came out of that were like the gush you had here. They had things like, well, if you go to a rock concert, it isn't all of a sudden the door opens and you're supposed to sing. They have warm-up music. So they started having warm-up music. So you can see different stakeholders, years in the organization, different experiences. Principle 3, customers, vendors, suppliers, dealers, they're all over the place. To go back with yours, to do the same situation with the Coughlins, to do it with some of your dealers, or what do you call them? Brokers. Sit down and do the same thing with a group of your brokers for a couple of hours. They'd be happy to do it. You know ones that they'd be privileged to do it. And they'll give you some really rich ideas. You do the same thing with your staff, but do it with a group of your best customers. And they're there, they want to help. Didn't everybody here want to help their client? It's the same thing that goes on. Why don't you at each table take the first project on it's on page 112, finding and setting up a temporary warehouse. And you see what they had to do, overall purpose, find 50,000 square feet of dry, safe space, and they had to get in, be operational in 3 weeks. And the purpose of the session is to identify all the parts of the plan. So we got to sit down, figure out what we need to do, and get into action. And you can see the headers there, etc. Without flipping the page, who would you put on a team like that? Not Mary, Bill, and Tom, but positionally, who would you put on that team? And somebody at each table write down the positions that you would design for your team. Just go design a project team to resolve this issue. Real world, you spend a lot of time on this. This is so critical, but just to drive home these principles. What we'll do is start over here, share with who you have, and then the others, if you have the same one, cross it off.
Okay, real estate agent, some vendors who deliver things to the warehouse, maybe a professional organizer.
We had a developer,
Okay,
warehouse manager.
Truck driver, forklift operator, company controller.
okay. Now, obviously, this is a setup just to see, but if you turn the page like Kaufman men did, you'll see who this group put on their team in their issue. Any surprises? Okay. The principal of the night shift supervisor, and I'd put a star next to that because that's probably the least obvious that frequently gets organizations in the most trouble. Many organizations are planned by daytime people, and second and third shift are not involved, even or you can take like on a university or a college campus, full-time faculty are involved, but the 80% of the faculty of the adjunct are out of sight, out of mind. I've been doing this kind of thing since I was 12, and I am still amazed at where the breakthroughs are, and so often they are at absolutely 101 simplicity. Provide hot food for the people that are caring for your staff all night, and you get a whole different system, and it plays out to things like labor negotiations and other things. It's not just nice, do good, be happy. I mean, we're talking from a business case why it makes sense to do these kind of things, wherever you are. I mean, wherever you are. Why don't you flip to page 116? Here's another situation. Don't flip the page. Now, look at the topic, everyone.
All right.
The topic is they had a massive fall off, almost a collapse in their emergency room business. And the issue is to find out why and what would you do to turn it around. And people outside of healthcare say, well, isn't that good? And people in healthcare, no, that's the pipeline to a huge amount of business. So without reading the back, as you look at this design, who would you put on a project team to try and resolve that? Rico, who did you put on your team?
Well, we picked the fire department, like ambulance drivers, the police department, community residents, insurance personnel.
A dispatcher?
Okay, now, why don't you look on the backside to see who they put on their team? It doesn't make yours right or wrong, it doesn't, and this is a quick drill on something that you would spend a lot more time on, but you can see who they put on their team. Any surprises? Any surprises? X-ray tech, any others? Okay. The reason that there's a principle of why the X-ray tech was there. Because if you have a function that is like this, you want to have somebody upstream and downstream of that function engaged with trying to resolve it. Okay? So the upstream person on this team is who? Yeah, it's the ambulance. I mean, they bring a lot of business into the downstream. Who is the person? It's the X-ray. What percent of people that go into an AER end up in X-ray one or another?
I don't know the exact percentage, Jared, but a significant percentage.
It's a high
Yeah.
percent. And there was one person that had a validity of data that others could have missed. The story we got back on it was that person brought information no one else had, and it was kind of subtle information. It was almost covert. Who do you guess that person was?
The patient.
Yeah. It was the ambulance, the crew chief. What happened is they had a cost containment, you know, hospitals either cut costs and sell more. I mean, pretty fundamental feature. And somebody went through and said, well, what's room over there, and they said, well, that's where the EMTs can stay between runs. And, oh, yeah, how much that cost? Oh, 30 grand a year. Do anything else? Yes, we have an annual recognition dinner for them. I guess you can cut that. They just cut the bone out of the EMTs, and I mean, you're not, I mean, doesn't it make you sick? So all you need is one good car wreck, and you could pay for the EMTs for a long time. And by having that information, they were able to recoup slowly. But they could have gone and put in new systems, they could have changed traffic patterns, they could have spent millions and not found the cause, which was so subtle, which makes a point of who is your real customer. Because we had the experience, my wife tore her ACL, and we were out to a restaurant, and she kept passing out. Boom, boom, I mean, like 4 times in about 2 minutes. And called 911, they came in and they brought all, you know, the gurney and everything into the restaurant, hauled her up. And I said to the 23-year-old ambulance crew chief, if she was your mother, where would you take her? He says, I can tell you where I wouldn't take her, and there's only one place I would take her. I said, get this thing going. So who was the customer there? Was it Phyllis? No. Was it Jerry? No. It was the 23-year-old ambulance chief. So it's kind of an interesting story, but the point is, you spend real time thinking through who are the key players. It should be like an NFL draft, and having people who are sent to represent, forget it, get the right people in the right space at the right time. Then you have compression planning.